Eating when not hungry is one of the most common and most misunderstood drivers of weight gain, metabolic deterioration, and emotional distress across the lifespan. It may seem like a simple habit, but the forces behind non-hunger eating are powerful, varied, and often deeply rooted in age-specific vulnerabilities. From adolescence through older adulthood, the triggers evolve, yet the dangers only grow more severe as the body becomes less resilient to overeating and as psychological patterns become more entrenched. What begins as an occasional indulgence in youth can quietly escalate into a lifelong struggle with appetite regulation, emotional eating, and chronic disease. In adolescence, the groundwork for non-hunger eating is often established without anyone noticing. Teenagers live in a state of heightened emotional reactivity, with brains wired for sensation seeking and immediate gratification. Stress from school, social pressure, and identity formation drives young people toward foods that provide fast comfort. Because ultra-processed foods stimulate dopamine quickly, teens learn early that eating can blunt emotional discomfort. The danger is not only the calories consumed, but the conditioning that follows. The brain begins to associate any negative feeling, boredom, loneliness, anxiety, with a need for food, even when physical hunger is absent. Complicating this, hormonal shifts during puberty can intensify cravings and destabilize appetite cues. Adolescents who repeatedly eat in response to feelings rather than hunger may never fully develop accurate hunger-fullness awareness, weakening self-regulation long before adulthood begins. Young adults inherit these patterns and often deepen them. The college years or early work life bring new stresses, erratic sleep schedules, and environments saturated with cheap, hyperpalatable foods. Many young adults eat late at night, snack during work, or use food as a substitute for rest or emotional grounding. Here, boredom, fatigue, and loneliness become major triggers for non-hunger eating. Food fills empty moments, compensates for lack of structure, or becomes a coping mechanism for the sense of instability that often characterizes this life stage. Physiologically, poor sleep and high stress elevate ghrelin, the hunger hormone, even when calorie needs are technically met. This hormonal confusion makes it even harder for young adults to distinguish true hunger from stress-driven cravings. Over time, eating to soothe emotions becomes not just a habit, but a deeply wired behavioral loop that strengthens with repetition. By middle age, the stakes of non-hunger eating become far more serious. Adults in their 30s, 40s, and 50s often face chronic stress from parenting, career demands, financial pressure, and relationship strain. The emotional load can be overwhelming, and many turn to food as one of the few available, socially acceptable coping mechanisms. Stress hormones, especially cortisol, increase appetite and intensify cravings for high-calorie foods, even when the stomach is not remotely empty. At the same time, the body's metabolism slows, muscle mass declines, and the margin for overeating shrinks dramatically. Food that once didn't cause weight gain suddenly sticks, yet the emotional reliance on eating only grows stronger. Non-hunger eating in this stage is often automatic, grabbing snacks during work, finishing food while cooking, or grazing throughout the evening as a way to detach from exhaustion. Adults may feel a deep sense of shame or frustration about their eating habits, but the physiological and psychological pressures make change extremely difficult. This is often when emotional eating finally manifests as noticeable weight gain, prediabetes, or rising inflammation. For older adults, non-hunger eating takes on a different, but equally dangerous form. Loneliness, reduced mobility, retirement, and changes in social structure can leave large emotional voids that food easily fills. Eating becomes a way to cope with isolation, grief, or loss of purpose. Many older adults also struggle with disrupted hunger cues due to medications, chronic illness, or diminished taste sensitivity. Because natural hunger signals weaken, eating becomes more driven by habit, emotional need, or sensory reward rather than genuine nutritional requirement. And since the body's metabolic flexibility declines sharply after 60, Even small amounts of unnecessary eating can lead to rapid weight gain, worsening insulin resistance, or dangerous fluctuations in blood sugar. Older adults who turn to food for comfort may unknowingly accelerate the progression of metabolic syndromes, cardiovascular disease, or cognitive decline tied to chronic inflammation. Across all ages, hedonic eating, eating purely for pleasure, stimulation, or emotional relief, is the common thread. The modern food environment makes this nearly unavoidable. Hyper-flavored, calorie-dense foods are engineered to trigger dopamine far more intensely than natural foods ever could. This trains the brain to seek eating not for sustenance, but for reward. Over time, pleasure-driven eating wires itself into neural circuits so deeply that it becomes indistinguishable from hunger. People begin to feel compelled to eat simply because the brain has learned that food equals comfort, distraction, or emotional anesthesia. The warning here is profoundly sobering. Non-hunger eating is not a harmless habit. It is a powerful behavioral and physiological pattern that can entrench itself across decades, growing more destructive as the body ages and becomes less capable of absorbing its consequences. Each stage of life brings unique vulnerabilities, but the outcome is disturbingly consistent. Emotional eating erodes the body's ability to regulate appetite. It distorts the hunger-fullness cycle. It increases the risk of obesity, metabolic disease, cardiovascular strain, and ultimately a gradual decline in both physical and emotional resilience. The most troubling part is that many people don't realize how early these patterns start or how much damage is done before they ever question why they are eating when they aren't hungry. And by the time the consequences emerge in their 40s, 50s, or 60s, the behavior feels like an inseparable part of daily life. Recognizing the triggers is only the first step. Without intervention, non-hunger eating can quietly shape a person's entire metabolic trajectory, turning momentary emotional relief into decades of health loss.